David, you talk a lot about shadow and how that is associated with the adrenaline response. Could we talk more about what is shadow?
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
that's my sort of take on it. That's my perception of it. So, shadow is the parts of ourselves that we deny, avoid, and repress. The parts of ourselves that we don't want to look at. The parts of ourselves that we don't like. I think we spoke about this before, but when we're children, we have to push a part of ourselves down in order to survive. And that part that we push down is called shadow. It's a Jungian term. And basically, it is the part of ourselves. Our shadow is in our inability to see ourselves clearly, and so we avoid parts of ourselves because we've rejected them as children. And in order to integrate, in order to create whole and healthy relationships, my personal belief is we need to re-embrace our shadow. It never goes away completely, but we can integrate it into ourselves. We can own it. We can claim it. And then we can navigate it based on what we know about ourselves.
Just so our listeners get a more clear picture about shadow, can you give an example of shadow?
So for me, a piece of my shadow is that when I was a young man, I was beaten up a lot. So
Like physically beaten up?
Physically beaten up,
Oh,
yeah. So
okay.
I have sort of a hypervigilance around personal safety, whereas other people might not have that. So I'm very aware in social situations of personal safety and the safety about people I care about. So that's shadow. Some people, and shadow can also be our greatest gift to the world, our greatest gift to ourselves and to our families. So the things that are our flaws are also our greatest power because we put our power into it. So my ability to navigate situations and to see things ahead of time can be very useful in a situation that might start to go south.
So shadow might be like you're a person who's like super bossy, or you're a person who runs away when a stressful situation comes up, or you're
Exactly.
a person who lashes out when you feel like you're being attacked, or
And
you're,
often, yeah, and oftentimes oftentimes shadow will come out when we're children. We decide, I'm never going to be like that person.
right.
I'm never going to be like that person. And in saying that and in believing that, we repress the parts of ourselves that are like that person.
So for me, when I was young, my parents were very verbally violent. So there's lots of yelling going on, lots of criticism going on,
Right.
lots of physical violence going on. And I remember that exact conversation in my head, like, I'm never going to be like them, right?
Right.
And so what did I do? I repressed all that. Anytime I felt angry, I internalized it. Anytime
Right.
I felt like yelling, I internalized it. Anytime I felt like lashing out or being physically aggressive, I just internalized it.
You turned it on yourself.
Turned it in, and,
Right.
and that's part of my shadow is like I am violent to myself. I am I'm
Right.
aggressive and abusive to myself because I promised myself I would never have that go
Right.
outward.
And a healthy part of what they did, I'm not saying what they did was healthy, but there's a healthy piece of that, which is the ability to set boundaries. So when, I'm very similar, when I decided I'm never going to be a bully, so I become ingratiating. I don't set boundaries for myself. I'm a pleaser, I'm a yes person, right? So, and in doing that, it can backfire because then we can't draw on our power to set healthy boundaries.
So it can either be our poison, our shadow can either be our poison, or it can be our power,
Exactly.
depending on
Or
how we
both.
approach it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what shadow is. So it's the parts of ourselves we don't want to look at. And my personal experience and belief is that in my life, when we talked about adrenaline before as a way to survive, as a way to save our lives if we're swimming away from a shark or we're hanging off a cliff. But in social situations or in romantic love situations, when I'm adrenalized, it points to my shadow. When I'm adrenalized, it points to a part of myself I don't want to look at. So if I'm interacting with my partner and all of a sudden I feel the adrenaline, I'm starting to get angry, I'm starting to get irritated, I'm starting to rise up. In interpersonal interactions, that always points to shadow. So that's like a canary in a coal mine. That's an awesome sign that, Dave, your shadow's up. Maybe it's time to look at that.
Say more about that. That's super interesting. Maybe give some examples.
Another piece of shadow of my personal shadow was when I was a young male, other males would try to humiliate me in front of my partner, in front of my girlfriend. So I tend to have a hypervigilance around those social situations, even if they're not trying to do that anymore, even if it's not real, I'm projecting it onto them because that's my trigger. And even if my partner's being perfectly appropriate. So if I'm in a social situation and there's some sort of thing that I interpret as aggression towards me through my girlfriend, I will get adrenalized and I have to take a breath and go, okay, oh, okay, this is not me, right? Now, sometimes men do that, but very, 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 very seldom now as an adult will that happen. Most men are respectful of boundaries and respectful of, basic sort of social skills in couples and relationships. But it happens occasionally, but most of the time it's my shadow. So if I feel that adrenaline, rather than blaming my partner or lashing out at those men, I go, okay, this is my stuff. What's really happening here? What's really happening is everybody's being inappropriate and I'm just triggered, so I navigate that. And I navigate that by self-soothing.
Okay. And we're going to talk about self-soothing in just a second, but before we go there, you mentioned before that facing your shadow and integrating your shadow is one of the ways to heal yourself physically and emotionally.
Well, I think it's at the core of healing. There was a sign above my office on the Big Island said "Healing before curing," and because my personal belief is that we can heal without curing and we can cure without healing. A big part of healing emotionally is accepting our shadow and seeing reality, and then moving from that place of accepting our weak spots, the parts we don't like, and then moving forward. That moves us into, and that's the process of integrating. It's just a matter of being willing to look in the mirror. Do I like the guy I see in the mirror? And if not, can I accept my weak points? Can I accept my flaws and my shadow? And then can I use them to empower me? And the foundation piece of that is looking in the mirror and going, yep, it's my truth. This is who I am. Warts and all.
And I've been going through that process myself, and the part I've been working on is my self-abuse and my self-aggression that I've turned all, I'm never going to be like that, so I turn it in on myself, and I never realized it. So I've been going through lots of coaching and counseling to help me even be aware that I'm doing that. And once I'm aware, then what I did is I was like, oh my gosh, I've been hurting myself all these years, bad, right? And I do more self-abuse, right?
Bad dog,
how
dog,
could you
bad
do that,
dog,
right? Like, how could you ruin your life by abusing yourself? Bad girl, right? And
I feel guilty about feeling guilty.
Right, exactly. Right. And so, it took a lot of coaching to get me to the place to do where what you said, where I can look in the mirror and I can say to myself, good job, you used all the skills you had at the time to survive and to to handle things in the situation you were in, and great work, and be very gentle with myself. And now I want to create a different reality for myself, and in being gentle to myself like that, then I could turn around and start giving myself lots of love. So every time I saw myself being self-abusive or, very harsh on myself, those are the times when I can turn around and show myself the love that I wish other people had shown to me. And that's been very, very healing. And that's one of the ways that I'm integrating my shadow for healing right now.
And one of the things we can do is we can say, how would I treat my best friend this way? Mm-hmm. I'm such an idiot. I'm such a fucking idiot. But right?
Yeah.
But I wouldn't talk to my best friend that way. Not a chance. So why would we talk to ourselves that way? Mm-hmm. And there's always a part of ourselves that is going to be self-aggressive and stuff, and that's fine. But navigating, the way we think and the way we react and analyzing that and just really looking at that and taking responsibility for it it's a lifelong project, but it's really worth it.
Yeah.
To create integration. Yeah.
Absolutely. So I want to segue into part of this is knowing how to treat ourselves, knowing how to treat other people. This is all part of emotional intelligence.
Yeah, and emotional intelligence, it's a very sort of popular term now. I think of it as having two basic pieces. One is the ability to navigate our adrenaline, to react rather than respond, or to respond rather than react. And then the other piece is to have a model of what's a reasonably healthy psyche for somebody here in the West. It would be different in Asia and different parts of the world, but here in the West, what would we consider a reasonably healthy psyche?
Okay, so let's dive deeper into like response versus reaction.
Okay, so if I'm triggered and if I just react, if I allow my emotion, my physiological response to dictate my behavior, I'm reacting. And there's only one, I believe there's only one thing in the world that I can control, and that's my behavior. And I can't control my thoughts, I can't always control my feelings, but I can always, at least in theory, always control my behavior. And that's what I'm responsible for. That's the only thing really that I'm responsible for is my behavior. So,
can you give an example of like a situation that might come up that will adrenalize you, and
Sure.
then responding, and then another, and then how you would respond to that situation and how you'd react to that situation?
yeah, so well, I'm sure you're familiar with, you're arguing with a partner and you're going back and forth and you get this kind of arms race, this escalation, and you're both getting really angry. And once my partner Jody and I, once one of us realizes we're adrenalized, we have a series of steps that we'll go through. But basically, if I'm adrenalized, I'm looking at my partner and I'm angry, I don't want to say something that's going to be destructive, because when I'm feeling angry, my desire is to hurt. I want to wound somebody. But in my relationship, I don't want to wound my partner. I temporarily feel that impulse to hurt, but if I do that, I'm crapping in my own nest, right? I'm destroying the thing that I love the most. So I'm adrenalized, I want to say something nasty, I have some options. I can say to my partner, which is what Jody and I will often do, we'll say, okay, let's do a slow check-in, which is our way of communicating under adrenal stress. I may also say, I want to hear what you have to say, but I'm too triggered to talk about this right now. I'm going to come back and talk about it in an hour, or in a half an hour, or in 10 minutes, or whatever, and then I'll walk away. I can also go into active listening. I can drop my breathing and shift into my awareness to my belly and breathe deeply and just start listening to what she's saying and do what we call loving between the lines or reading the air. And it takes a lot of willpower to override my adrenal response and really start to listen, but it can be done. So those are different possibilities.
Okay, so can we go into dive a little bit deeper into reading the air and dive a little bit deeper into this slow response? Slow check-in.
Slow check-in.
Slow check-in.
Okay.
So take it step by step through the slow check-in, and then take it step by step through the.
So a slow check-in would be something that my partner and I will do, where there's a lot of people that do different versions of this, but basically we'll repeat back what the other person says in small bits. And then we say, is that right? Is there more? Mm-hmm. So. Can
we do a quick example of that?
So give me an example.
Okay. Yesterday I went swimming and I got in the water, and for some reason I got really scared.
So you went swimming yesterday and you went into the water and then you got frightened. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Is there more?
Yeah. And so then I got out of the water, went up onto the beach, and I looked over the water. I'm like, maybe there's something dangerous in the water.
So you have to do it in short pieces.
Right. So you cut me off so I don't keep going too long.
So you got out of the water and you stepped back and you looked and you were seeing if there was any danger. Is that right?
Yeah.
Is there more?
Yeah, and I saw that there was no danger, so then I'm just being silly, jumped back in the water, and I started swimming again.
So you saw there was no danger, and then you got back in the water and you started swimming. Is that right? Mm-hmm. Is there more?
And then I got that freaked out feeling again.
Is there more?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
I got that freaked out feeling like I was in a horror movie, like Jaws was gonna come and chew me.
And you had that feeling like, oh my God, I'm scared and I'm afraid I'm gonna get eaten by a shark. Is that right?
Yeah, or shark or something else. And then I saw, oh yes, that's right.
So
I love how you're stopping me, right? Like I just want to plow through.
And I know it sounds crazy, it sounds ridiculous to have to say, yes, that's right. Is there more? Yes, is there more?
But it feels good. It makes me feel like you're listening and you're actively engaged in making sure you understand everything I say.
And if this goes back and forth too quickly, we become adrenalized again. Especially if we're talking about something that's triggering to both of us. That's not a triggering topic. But if we're talking about you and me and going back and forth and oh yeah, you, yeah, oh yeah, you, what about you, yeah, right? Mm-hmm. we get into adrenaline. But if you say, is that right? Yes. Or no, if it's not right, no, you correct it and then say, and you correct it, is that right? Yes. Is there more? Yes. That's a critical part of this, even though when I first learned this, I thought it was stupid because I know how to do this, this active listening stuff.
We know how to do that.
Right.
Yeah.
But it actually, it drops the sympathetic responses and then we can hear each other.
And there's something about you stopping me when I'm going too fast, and then and if I don't say yes, you're like, is that all? And if I don't say yes, you back up and you make me do it. There's something about you handling me that way where you're like, okay, I've got this handled, I'm in charge, and I'm gonna handle you properly, right? And that really is very soothing.
Oh, good, because it can be triggering to me. Like she's, I know how to do this, right? But yeah, so and one of the things is you'll have a timer, so you'll get to speak for 10 minutes or so, and then we switch places. And it's like a miracle because we're not in our frog brain, our adrenalized amygdala. We are in our frontal lobes. I'm listening, I have to repeat back, there's a slow pace. Sometimes I call this NVC on Valium, right? So it's like this slow, painfully slow, active listening, but it really works. So that is a slow check-in.
Slow check-in.
The other piece of this is what we call reading the air or loving between the lines. So that's a way of seeing the subtitles of our partner. So we have to drop out of our adrenal space enough, get out of our frog brain enough to look at our partner and say, where are they coming from and what's their vulnerability in this? Because oftentimes when we're arguing with our partner, we're coming from a childhood wound. So if I can see my partner's childhood wound, and I can see them reacting from that childhood wound, and I see it very clearly, rather than just reacting, if I can drop in, take a step back and see their wound, I'm less likely to be triggered by what they're saying. So that's called reading the air or loving between the lines.
That actually happened to me just a few days ago. I was the third party. I was the observer of this happening. But my sister had gone with her kids to visit my sister-in-law, and there were some miscommunications, and she didn't receive the welcome that she wanted. She felt like my sister-in-law didn't want her there, like she was being swished away, and like she was causing problems. And so my sister had called me up, and she had said like, oh, I can't believe it, like I'm so mad, like I took all that time to go over there and say hi to her, and she just like rejected me.
She didn't acknowledge me.
She didn't acknowledge me. And then my sister-in-law called me up, and she's like, I can't believe it. Your sister just showed up and expected me to like drop everything in my life, blah blah blah, and then like I couldn't. I had plans, and then she's mad at me, like, and so they were both mad at each other, and so I did the.
You saw the inner child. You saw the
right.
wound.
So what I did with my sister-in-law is, as I said, let's back up, and I call it the second conversation. The first conversation is the thing we're talking with our words, and then the second conversation is like everything else that's going on that's not being spoken, right? The subtitles. So with my sister-in-law, I said, can we just like listen to the subtitles, and can we approach her with her intention in the subtitles instead of like what's happening on the surface? So I said, what if she was so excited to come see you, and she was so excited for her kids to see you and see your kids, and that's all she could think about for like a week was like, yay, I get to go visit them. And she showed up, and all she wanted was like a loving embrace, right? She's just like, oh, and she wanted you to be as excited to see her as she was to see you. And then when she didn't get that, she was crushed, right? And she just felt so bad and had her feelings so hurt because she just wanted this exchange of love. And when my sister-in-law heard that, the whole story changed. So instead of her being angry and bitter and like, why did she do this to me? She's like, oh, she just wanted to give
she
love,
saw her
and she
being
wanted to
wounded
receive
rather
love.
than being entitled.
Right, exactly.
So same data but different interpretation.
And that totally changed the conversation, and then they were able to like talk it through together, and that changed everything because they were able to like relate on that level, on a level of reading between the lines, or reading the air. Is that how you call it?
Loving between the lines.
Loving between the lines.
And reading the air. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So those are two ways to when we're adrenalized, to not get into reaction, to get into response.